So it's important when undertaking something like GOE prep to understand how our brains work in processing material because we want to study smart, not to study hard. And so there's the whole field of brain science, and it's a really fascinating field in the study of education of how our brains work. And one thing that brain scientists have discovered is the difference between passive learning and passive absorption of material and active learning or active absorption of material. And passive absorption of material can actually be really deceptive because an example of that would be reading a book. It's passive absorption because you are simply receiving the information. When you're reading a book, it's actually really easy to be like, oh yeah, I get this. Like, this makes sense to me. Because you actually are only being asked to understand what someone else has said. You're not actually being asked to actively produce something. And so when it comes to something like studying for the GOEs, it might seem like it's a really good idea to go and read through all of your class notes or reread books. But that actually isn't necessarily the best way of preparing because it's all passive reception of material. On the contrary, actively working with material and producing material makes your brain remember it better in the moment. And so, like, if you have to summarize something, take something that you've read and put it in your own words, you actually remember what you've read better at the end of that activity than just underlining it. Or if you take something that you've read and create an outline for it, or if you take something that you've read and have a discussion about it, all of those things are considered active forms of learning because your brain has to produce something. And it is in the production of that the material sticks in your mind better. So this is why in other videos and in our sessions with professors, we keep talking about practice with the questions, because when you sit down with a question in front of you and have to come up with an answer, with even if you just outline it and don't necessarily actually ever write the essay, and even if you do it working with a study group, that's really productive because that's all active work. That's all your brain doing the work to produce a product, whether that's an outline or some ideas on the board or an actual essay, your brain will process those concepts better than simply by reading through class notes. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with going back through your class notes. That can be really helpful. But the more active you can be with the material, the more often you can produce something, the better off you're going to be.